Good morning. This is 25th of June 2020, and I'm sitting here in my house with my children, Borkin and Lara, and they're going to interview me. And this is part of a video sequence I'm doing on topics of interest to adults and martial artists and everybody and anybody involved in politics, in thinking and writing and philosophizing about our situation today, especially here in Scotland and of course in Britain, and I would add to Western Europe and America. So my children are going to ask me some specific questions, and I'm going to try to answer them the best I can, and I hope that you can take away some thoughts and ideas as to how we're going to progress forward in these difficult and challenging times. So we'll start with the first question.
What is chivalry?
What is chivalry, Lara? Okay, if I was to answer that question, I'll use an analogy. If you couldn't see the colour blue and ask me what is blue, I would describe different shades of blue. So could you think of some shades, for example, different shades?
Dark blue, light blue, cyan, aqua.
Yeah, there's so many, isn't there? I'm thinking of Prussian blue, dark blue, sky blue, aquamarine, so many different shades, but they all have the quality of blueness. So chivalry is like that. It really stands for honour and justice, especially in a war situation, and in maintaining a certain standard of justice among the warrior class we call it Aryan societies. I would extend that to the Arab societies as well, and to modern societies to a lesser extent. So it's the idea that the warrior caste or the warrior group have a certain values, and these values should encompass things like the just war, the right war, how to treat enemy combatants, how to treat your own population in times of peace, how not to bully them, how to perhaps maintain justice in a time of peace and stop robbery and violence. And on this topic of Black Lives Matter, what's interesting is once chivalry started to die away, you had a resurgence of slavery in society. But that's a big topic to get into, so I'm not going into it now, I'm just mentioning it, how it works. And it was also very important that men and women had a certain space which they could retreat to, and men were supposed to bring their families up in a chivalrous way, especially when they belong to the royal and warrior class group in society. And here I'm talking about ancient Greece, Europe, India. They all had slightly different ideas of chivalry, but you could compare them and say, oh, that's similar to that, oh, that's slightly different here in this society. So it's a common cultural, what we call a trait, or movement or idea that's established into societies. Okay, we'll go to the second question now.
Why did chivalry fall away in European culture?
Well, that's a very complex question. I've been trying to answer that now for 30, 40 years. What I've come to the conclusion was that chivalry evolved and gradually developed into this quite amazing culture. However, there were difficulties associated with its development. The Christians had a big input into its development in the sense that in the early Middle Ages it was a crime to kill people, and this was extended to warriors also. They were asked not to use violence only as a last resort. However, during times of economic struggle and scarcity, warriors ditched chivalry and they became brigands and robbers, and they hired themselves out to other kings and queens who were wanting to wage wars. They became known as the mercenary, paid for soldiers, and they would dress up as knights and warriors, but they were not really chivalrous. They were there to cause harm and danger to society. So there was this struggle between the church and between a kind of vagabond criminal group. And we have to remember also there was no police force in those days, so it was up to the knights to try to maintain a peace. When once knights got rich and wealthy, sometimes they didn't want to enforce the justice, or they didn't want to take part in wars, so they stepped out of society a little bit and enriched themselves. So knights themselves, that's the warrior class in Europe, are partly to blame. The other thing I would say would be the divisions within religion in the Islamic world and in the Christian world, and we can extend it to Persia as well. These divisions caused societies to become atomized and sections to fight against each other, and then that became developed into civil wars, which are probably the worst kind of wars because families end up fighting families. So all concepts of chivalry evaporated. And then during the later Middle Ages, with the invention of guns, your knight on his horse and his ways became out of date. They could no longer, knights could not prevail on the battlefield anymore, and so they became redundant. Chivalry did survive with some of the officers right up to Napoleon's time and beyond. They had a sense of justice and fair play in war. I would probably praise Napoleon for this, because if you read some of his accounts of his campaigns, he tries to show mercy and chivalry to defeated enemies. For example, many of the Russians in the Russian campaigns were taken to France and worked on the fields and had a certain amount of freedom. And actually, when they went back to Russia, they helped to start the Russian Revolution, because they said in France they have more freedom than we have here. So, you know, why can't we have a society a bit more like theirs? So that was the seed of one of the seeds of the Russian Revolution. There have been small revivals in chivalry, especially in Europe during the Romantic age. So you had famous artists and writers like Walter Scott, who wrote Ivanhoe. You had the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, which they tried to go back to the ideals of chivalry and express that in their paintings. But other people have criticised that and said, well, it's just romantic imagination, it has no value to it. But I think it has more than that, because during the First World War, when the Titanic was sinking, we know that the educated men on board let the women and children go first to the lifeboats. So this was a chivalrous act on their behalf.
Why did you put up the old 1961 film El Cid starring Sophia Loren and Charlton Heston on Facebook?
Yes, I'm running a small Facebook page trying to attract attention to my ideas. It's called the East-West Bridge School, and I've been doing, as you know, Chinese and Japanese martial arts, and I was also looking at the Western tradition. And for the last year I've been focused, last 6 months I've been trying to think again on the Western tradition. So I thought, people don't actually understand chivalry. They think it just means old-fashionedness, or, you know, giving a girl roses on her birthday, that kind of thing. That is also part of chivalry, but it's much, as I said at the beginning, it's much, much more than that. So the El Cid film is very long, and it's a bit tedious in parts because it goes into a lot of details. However, somebody on YouTube had divided it up into 24 segments. So I took a segment It's during the time of El Cid's banishment from the court. I'm trying to remember, is it Asturias? It's one of the small Spanish kingdoms. He's exiled from there, so he goes on a wander, and Spain's having a lot of problems with internal strife, internal warfare, and he's much more than a mercenary. He's trying to actually bring people together and create a justice in the society. And he's married to the beautiful Donna Germain, who's Sophie Loren, of course, who's very famous, and was a great actress as well. So the two of them have a good chemistry on the film, and they bring the Bronson, the guy that helped to direct the film. He brings out, he and his team, they really brought out the sense of that period in the costumes, the speech, the religious Catholic faith comes quite strong in the film, because people were very strongly attached to their faith at that time. So it's a kind of a window into the past, and it makes us think of today, well, if that was like that then, what is it they had that we've lost? And I think that comes out in the film if you sit back and think about the film. And it's also fun to watch. Also, El Cid is Arabic, comes from an Arabic expression, because El Cid made friends with many of the Arab people who had integrated into Spanish society. And at the time, they were facing a threat from, shall we say, fanatic Arabs from across the Straits of Gibraltar. The Al Muhammad dynasty, they were very tough and a little bit aggressive, and the civilized Muslims in Spain didn't like that group, and so it shows that how chivalry shared aspects of Islamic traditions and Christian traditions, and that comes together in the film. So that's why I put it up. I dislike it because it's colonized our thinking processes, and it was Socrates who said that we should have a market of ideas, and that when you go to the market you should be able to discuss different points of view without getting, vilified and called names and said you're using hate speech, this kind of stuff. And political correctness has been growing now for many years, and what it's doing is it's shutting down good conversation, because as I said, it's colonized the mind, it's colonized the thinking processes.
Why do we need chivalry, honour and courtesy back in British European society?
I think we do need this back. We need it back in all spheres of life. And I think men need to create a better sphere for themselves to be able to discuss this topic, and women too need to maybe step aside and discuss this topic so that we can make better relationships between the two. At the moment, it seems to me it's confusing, because the whole political correctness philosophy is confused the thinking processes and identities of both men and women to some extent. And so if we were to bring back a general discussion and then bring these ideas back into the military and perhaps the police and the civil servants and local government, we might be able to have an idea of shame and honour and doing the right thing. I know it sounds a bit corny, but just today, for example, there's a big scandal about how it seems that the Conservative government have been bought, or somebody in the government has been bought or influenced over the construction of houses down in London. And this sort of thing's actually been going on for a while. They do things they do things according to money and power, and it means that the ordinary people or folks just like us, we don't really have a lot of say in how things are run in society. It's not really equality and justice, it's preference and power. And preference and power is it's causing this terrific stress and strain on us because it's unfair and unjust, and we have to end it. And furthermore, criminals operate very freely in this society now, it seems. They seem to get away with it. And that's again going to cause what's causing us a lot of problems. And no one seems to be able to address it. So we have to bring back a kind of firmness into society, a firmness that is built on perhaps the old-fashioned values. Perhaps people need to get back a sense of shame and to go with that with honour. And also, you know that I'm very sympathetic to the Baha'i faith. I hope that it too can strengthen itself in the ways I've described. But that's another topic. So that's what I'd like to see, Laura. I published this book, White Swan Code of Chivalry, in 2015. You can't find it in the bookshops, I had to self-publish it. It's available on Amazon. So you'll see my ideas there. This is an ongoing work in a sense that more research needs to be done, particularly into one of the colours of chivalry, if I may say, is Zoroastrianism from the Persians, which is not in the book, but as I say, there's more research needs to be done. This book is really covers the topics I've just discussed on this video presentation. I would like to reinstitute an order of chivalry, perhaps in 2021, but I need some help to do this. Don't have the resources to do it myself. But maybe what I need to do first of all is to try and get friends and martial artists and people in civic society interested to do a Zoom conference perhaps and see what ideas come up, and then I think from there we could institute a new order. We can do useful self-defense, especially against knife attack. We can perhaps learn a bit more about our real history and some of the current events that are going on in the world. We can look at things through a new perspective. So I'd like to open this up to anybody who feels that I've struck a chord with them. And so I will post further things up on Facebook. There's quite a lot of material up on the East West Bridge School of Martial Arts at the moment, and I look forward to growing this idea and establishing it in the world. Thank you very much, and hope you have a good day.